Thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Andrew Bremberg, and I am the president of the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation. And we are excited to discuss with you, those who've joined us today, the groundbreaking new report that was just published yesterday. In a moment, I will introduce Dr. Adrian Zenz, the author of this report and the director of our China Studies program here at VOC. But at the outset, I just want to say how incredibly grateful we are for the incredible media interest, the incredible international team of media organizations that did really important investigative work in response to the documents that we would have been able to provide them. And before I introduce Dr. Zenz, I know there's been lots of questions about the implications of this new evidence and as it relates to what's happening in the international community, the UN, et cetera. I just wanted to say a couple things at the outset. So first, what is clear by, this has been reported, this is an unprecedented hack, tens of thousands of documents that show conclusively that the government of China has been lying about their insistence that all these camps and facilities are merely vocational training centers. And as the report and documents lay out, that is clearly not the case. And I won't go into more of that. I'll let Dr. Zenz talk about that. But what I just want to touch on is the implications for that. From a human rights perspective, we have now seen for years that the Chinese government is committing heinous human rights violations and crimes, now we would label genocide, in Xinjiang to the Uyghur people and other ethnic and religious minorities. It is incumbent on the government of the United States and all governments around the world that profess to believe in and care about human rights to take action. I'm happy to discuss some of those specifics later in this discussion, but it's important that this takes place now that we have seen such brutal evidence. We've seen with our own eyes the photos that make clear that these are detention facilities, not vocational centers. And I would just add it from an introductory perspective. The timing of this is quite incredible. Right now, we know the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, is traveling in China and to Xinjiang. This is a grave mistake on her part. It seems as though she has agreed to the conditions of a visit that, at her own description, will not allow any form of independent or unfettered access or investigation. And it is clearly, particularly with this new evidence, it is clear she bears the moral responsibility to ensure that she is not used by the government for propaganda purposes or to defend what are clearly indefensible human rights violations. So I just wanted to put that at the outset, and I'd like to now turn it over to Dr. Zenz to talk briefly about this incredible work that he's done, and we can take your questions.
Thank you very much. Indeed, yes, it's our pleasure here to respond to your questions. This press conference is designed to allow a whole bunch of media to ask questions and get responses. Let me briefly say I'm often asked, what is the special thing about this leak? And it's a hack. To be specific, it's a hack. So it was obtained from the outside, intruding, not leaked from the inside by somebody on the inside. I can also say that this was done by a third party, provided unexpectedly. So I did not commission any of this. I simply was offered it. And I was not offered it under particular conditions, but I was free to do what I wanted and saw fit with it. This is kind of the mother of leaks or hacks, rather. This is not just one thing that's special about this or unprecedented. This set of files is unprecedented on virtually every level. It answers key questions, open questions about this atrocity in many, many ways. Not all questions are being answered, but many questions are answered. So at the highest level, at the highest administrative level, the files speak to the involvement and knowledge of the central government in Beijing in the campaign of mass internment in Xinjiang including by Xi Jinping. And I have one publication in China File with China File that's highlighted both on our website and in my Twitter thread, where I specifically analyzed just one document, a speech by China's Minister of Public Security, Zhao Keji. He's still in power. He's probably going to be replaced this autumn, where he implicates the civil government. My second publication, the much longer one with the journal, the peer-reviewed academic publication with the Journal of the European Association for Chinese Studies, focuses on the security, the Xinjiang speeches and the security of the camps and the images. So we have at the top level in Beijing, the leadership in Beijing is implicated now for the first time in the mass internments, very directly. Then the leadership in Xinjiang, Chen Quanguo, who was replaced just recently, but he oversaw the whole campaign of mass internment. He gave some very strong statements that you can read about. And then we have a mid-level instructions, and then we have the camp security instructions, how to guard a camp, what weapons to be used by camp guards and police, and the procedures like when to shoot, how to respond to an escape, how to guard the camps. And then, of course, we have the images, firstly, images of the police drills of the Takers Detention Center that correspond to police security instructions in text format. And secondly, images of detained Uyghurs, 5,000. Not all of them were detained at the time. These images were taken in police stations and detention centers as part of obtaining biometric data, including images for facial recognition purposes, with a focus on a substantial amount of the population, but especially so-called focus persons that the state is particularly trying to keep an eye on. And 2,884 at least of these were confirmed to be in detention. We analyzed a set of over 450 spreadsheets that came with the file cache. And the set of spreadsheets contained the identities of 301,000 persons, of them 286,000 from one particular county, Kona Sheher or Shufu in Chinese. That's the entire population of the county. And we were able to assess that at least over 12% of all the ethnic minority adults in this county were in some form of imprisonment, internment, re-education camp, detention camp, etc. in the years 2017-18. Much of the data is from 2018, some from 2017. We often had more than one indicator of internment for this. And I think I would rather now stop. And we already have a list of questions, and you can continue to post questions. So I will now go through the questions that have been posted. And also Ambassador Bremberg is going to cut in from time to time to respond questions that he's more suitable to respond to, but I'll start at the top. China has been in denial mode over atrocities against Uyghur Muslims. This is asked by India Today. The forum, like the UN, have been speaking, but is there a strong message enough against it? I'll briefly comment. I'm sure Ambassador Bremberg can also briefly comment. In the UN, we have only had letters from Western countries, almost entirely Western countries, letters calling out the human rights allegation. China had a review for racial discrimination in 2018, where their record was examined more closely, but it was passed because China knows how to engage in elite capture, capturing a lot of countries, but also planting China-friendly non-profit organizations, so-called human rights organizations in the UN to get speaking time. They know how to swamp the UN. So the UN has been heavily paralyzed and heavily co-opted, has been substantially ineffective. And therefore, I think it's very much up to governments now. The US has spoken out, but now in response to the Xinjiang Police Files, we've had the German Foreign Ministry, the British Foreign Ministry, and apparently in Norway have been issuing statements. And many of them have not really spoken out before, at least not clearly or not for a long time about this. And it's really high time that more governments make statements now and do something.
And I would just add 2.1, just reiterating what I said at the outset. From what is the UN? What does the UN mean? So, from a human rights perspective, the two most clear organs or ways in which human rights would be discussed or addressed is one, the High Commissioner Bachelet. I met with her many times when I was ambassador to the UN in Geneva and spoke with her on this issue. She has not spoken out ever forcefully about this issue. And of course, as I said at the outset, she's now visiting Xinjiang with, in I think, a very compromised situation. It is imperative that when she returns, she release her office's long researched report on the atrocities happening in Xinjiang, and that she released before the next meeting of the Human Rights Council in June. She released that report. That report include analysis of this new data and information that we have provided, and that she clearly articulate the limitations placed on her by the Chinese government during her visit to China this week. Those are things she must do. And then the larger point that I think Dr. Zenz was just referring to, how do member states, how do governments and countries act? At this next session of the Human Rights Council, we can begin to see, does the United States and do other countries lead a resolution in the Human Rights Council to condemn these human rights abuses? That I think is an extremely important question in judging to what degree member states will actually take action in response to such tremendous evidence. In the past, the US and other countries have made joint statements or signed letters, raising concerns, but I think this is important for people to understand how the UN works and believe in these processes. The UN is particularly the Human Rights Council, is a system that runs through resolutions. The resolutions taken up in the council are the work of the council. Joint statements and letters that countries may do are kind of more peripheral. So the question will be, will governments take action to make sure that the UN, and particularly the Human Rights Council, is an actual forum that addresses and cares about the greatest human rights challenges of our time, or not? And I think the evidence presented in this report that Dr. Zenz has released really makes this very black and white option and choice for governments to face in the next month as to what actions they will take or not.
Yes. The Australian radio network asked, Chinese officials will argue that these documents prove nothing regarding rights abuses. What proof do they contain? So really, of course, they'll say that every time. They said that with every previous leak, basically. But how are you going to fake this amount of image material? And we don't just have images, we have PowerPoints that contain a huge amount of material, including image material. We have PDFs, we have original documents, we have spreadsheets of security drills containing photos of those security drills that are clearly from Xinjiang. We have the photos of the insides of highly classified police headquarters in Kunashir County. We have original documents for stamps, formatting, and everything on them. We have the images of police drills. Did we make up those police drills in our living rooms, reconstructing a Xinjiang detention camp? So I think this time, I think it's game over for them, even more so than before. These are not just documents. This image material, nobody is going to fake this image material. But even also the amount of these spreadsheets, the amount of these documents. If you were going to fake those, how much time would that cost? And you would make some mistakes, right? We looked at this closely. The material is also not very sensationalist. The BBC and many of the media involved interviewed Uyghurs who identified their relatives on images and in the documents. To answer that question, how many of those persons photographed in 2018 have been released? We don't know. The data ends at the end of 2018. We have the data cache only goes till the end of 2018. The Daily Wire asked if we anticipate this report triggering a large-scale international response. So it's had a huge impact in Europe. The impact in Europe, I can tell you, Germany, Central Europe, even Britain is very, very major. Britain did an urgent question in the parliament. The governments of Germany and the UK and Norway have commented now. So in Europe, the impact is huge. The US already has said things again, is already acting. The main problem are other countries, some Eastern European countries, some Southern European countries, countries outside of Europe, the Muslim world. That's where the problem is. And that's yeah, I'm not sure how big. I hope this can be bigger. I hope a bigger deal can be made, but we can't be certain about that, unfortunately. Were there any reactions or reaching out by governments around the world, especially Muslim majority countries, regarding the report? So among the 14 media outlets, there was not any Muslim ones. We had Japan. I tried to reach out to some other media, but it didn't really work. And I also was being cautious because this was very sensitive. I noticed reporting in several Malaysian outlets. Of course, BBC reporting often has an impact in those countries. You tell me. The Muslim governments have said nothing, but I think they only will if they're really forced to. And even then, they'll probably beat around the bush. So keep an eye on it and let us know. We're happy to amplify it. But unfortunately, we've not seen an initial response there. Has the UN High Commissioner Michelle Bachelet reacted to the Xinjiang Police File leak? I believe she hasn't reacted to anything. She has not reacted to any criticism of her visit. She has reacted to nothing. And she's only giving a video press conference on Saturday. So, which is going to make it harder for journalists to ask questions. It's easier to be screened. So you'll have to wait till Saturday to see what happens. I would like to hear more about the current condition of the Xinjiang children who got impacted by the mass detention. So among the 5,000 images, there's several hundred images of minors, of children. And these are typically children, some of them have maybe one parent in a camp or prison. And one family with 2 children is highlighted in my long research report with the journal. We don't know, there's no textual information about the fate of those children. They're probably in boarding schools. The state has built boarding schools. We don't know for sure. There's not so specific data on that. The youngest person in a camp is 15 years old. The image was taken when she was 14. You see that she's featured in my report. Yes, also it shows how many persons under 18, I think there was 16 or so minors identified among the images. So there are teenagers in camps, in re-education camps. And I believe I've pretty much answered the questions that were posted in the chat. Don't know if Ambassador Bremberg has any further comment.
No, not right now. I just ask, are there other questions that people would like to submit? And you can go ahead and submit those in the Q&A box.
Okay, I just read a question. There are people on behalf of Chinese government propaganda who are claiming this has been faked, even claiming they have proof. How have the leaks been independently verified? So the BBC has quite a bit about how they authenticated the files. The German Spiegel magazine and the German counterpart at the Bavarian broadcast, which is part of the national broadcaster investigative team. They have a 15-minute clip, and the 15-minute clip played at primetime German television really goes into detail how they analyzed the camera metadata, how they matched, how they geolocated. It's in German, unfortunately, but it's extremely impressive. The BBC one is in English. And of course, in my research paper, I also describe how I authenticated the material. So firstly, I looked at how do the documents compare to existing leaked documents in terms of the language, key terminology, the statements, the commands. So that's one aspect. Then I looked at the internal consistency of the material. Of course, you always have little mistakes and errors. That's normal. You always have at least a couple % of mistakes. These officials are under high pressure, and I've seen that in the past. You know, some images were duplicate, or there's some wrong ID associations because it's so much, you know. But the amount of consistency is hugely impressive at the same time. Then I also looked at image camera metadata. You know, you can see the camera serial number of the camera that took the images of the detention drill. It's very consistent. It's the same camera that the images were taken with, and we were able to geolocate the location of at least 2 of the facilities, match them. And then, of course, I think the most powerful argument is the sheer amount of material and the sheer amount of image material. Again, how are you going to fake this image material, right? With obvious, from Xinjiang Uyghurs, you could think, oh, the CIA could recreate a detention camp. Okay, maybe they can, but can they stage, hundreds of images of local police drills with people who totally look like Uyghurs and are dressed like Uyghurs and in a rural setting with obviously rural Xinjiang countryside buildings and Han Chinese police? I mean, they would have had hundreds of actors, right? I mean, somebody would have found out about this. Like this would be like a movie production, right? This would be like $100 million movie production where you try to recreate hundreds of scenes. So the amount of material is unbelievable. Okay, let's keep going here. So the Dutch Minister of Foreign Affairs said, very disturbed about the new information supporting long-held concerns about serious human rights violations in Xinjiang. The Netherlands repeats its call to China to fully respect human rights and to grant the UN unrestricted access for an independent report. Okay, I assume, what do you think about this reaction? So I think it's good. The material confirms long-held concerns about serious human rights violations. They say they're very disturbed. I think they should condemn it. This is conclusive. This is no longer an allegation, it's conclusive. So there should be condemnation. The Netherlands repeats its call to grant the UN unrestricted access for an independent report. So we know that that's not going to happen. We know this is unrealistic. We have all the evidence how the Chinese are staging and controlling visits. So let's stop being ignorant about how the Chinese are staging and controlling visits. I mean, you can call on that, but at the end of the day, we know that the visit of Michelle Bachelet is hugely problematic. So unrestricted access for lots, the UN should send lots of little investigative teams over the period of 1 or 2 years, one team every month, and constantly try to find out something and document where they were blocked, what they couldn't see, where access was restricted, and then write a report documenting the access that they received or were denied. That would be a useful exercise. We have journalists who documented also on video how their access was restricted, right? There was a roadblock, a fake accident. They couldn't go there. They taped it. Security people came and put their hands in front of the cameras. So that would be my response to that. And I think Ambassador Bremberg.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Adrian is saying, and not just about this Netherlands comment, but also how many countries are responding. Not just making statements and comments, but what actions are they going to take? So, of course, here in the United States, last year we passed the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. Now, that goes into in effect next month. So both for US policymakers, how will that be implemented? Will that be rigorously enforced to ensure we are not importing goods produced in Xinjiang by forced labor? Or will there be a wide array of exceptions made? So that's from the US. For the Europeans, they have not imposed this type of importation restriction to protect their supply chains. So they are vulnerable to a marketplace where they obviously can or will be importing goods almost certainly made by forced labor. They have the ability to change that. So to what degree will they take action and implement similar legislation to prevent that type of economic activity? Also, calling on China to grant unrestricted access for a UN investigation and report obviously is a good thing, but none of us are under the assumption that China will in fact do that. The question that I would have for our European friends and partners is, to what degree will they call on the UN High Commissioner to say, was it a mistake to go, to be transparent as, what requests did her office, OHCHR, make to China about independence and access and transparency, and what were denied? That conversation obviously took place over months, but that has been kept public, kept private and kept from the public. So will governments press not just China, but press the UN bodies to be more transparent about their own interactions, so it is clear? I think we all believe OHCHR wanted more transparency for the visit, but they, by their silence, kind of protect the government of China from criticism of whatever restrictions they put in place. So I think it's incumbent upon them to be much more transparent, and all of these governments can do more than simply just making these statements, which are important to begin with, but need to be followed by action.
Yes, very good. Let's keep going here. Is any of the information new or surprising, or is it all a confirmation of things we knew? Let's start at the top. We had some evidence that Xi Jinping said things in 2014 that quite directly pointed to an approval of where Xinjiang was heading with where they were at re-education at the time. They were developing re-education. They were, at the end of 2014, using some of the first camps. It was slowly evolving. There was an approval of where they were going. So we could make quite a few inferences about this, important inferences. But it's a totally different thing to have Zhao Keji, Minister of Public Security, say, Xi Jinping has said and given instructions, more prison guards, more camps, expand the camps, they're overcrowded. Okay? And him saying Beijing is aware of the problems, the challenges, and they will provide money for the operating cost of the re-education centers. That's just smoking gun. So that it raises it to the next level. The statements from Chen Quanguo, again, we've had almost nothing from Chen Quanguo. He was always taking the back seat at press conferences. We just knew he was the official in charge, but his words, his blunt, direct words saying the authorities should have opened fire in 2009 at the Urumqi riots. He's dismayed that they didn't shoot at people. I mean, wow. Okay, so that's what we got now. And then police, we had the China cables saying the camps need to be, the camps need to have security, anti-escape measures, police guards, okay. But now we have detailed instructions about how to guard the camps, when to start shooting, what weapons to use, sniper rifles in watchtowers, light machine guns being used in watchtowers. So next level evidence. And the image material also largely supports what we knew. So I suppose there's not a revelation of a dramatic new angle to this, to this atrocity in general. So like a dramatic new angle would be like evidence of mass killing, mass organ harvesting, mass medical experimenting, things that we have no evidence of, and we're not sure whether they're happening or not. They may not be, or they may be. But we don't have that kind of evidence. So yes, I mean, but some of this, of course, is surprising to see some of the bluntness, some of the security. So at the end of my long research report, I summarize the insight from the new information. I say, I'm surprised to what extent the Chinese are believing their own propaganda. Chen Quanguo and the central government, they believe their own propaganda. Oh, there's a terrorist threat. We need to secure these people are a threat. That is surprising, and political paranoia is a common feature in mass atrocity crimes. That's something I mentioned very clearly at the end of my research paper. And I think that's something media can really highlight, because I think the existing media consortium focused on the evidence and not on my analysis.
I would just very briefly add in that what Dr. Zenz just talked about, these speeches by senior government officials, this is new evidence. Obviously, we suspected, obviously we knew at some level that this was being directed by the central government, but knowing the individuals are directly involved and implicated, I think also has relevance for how governments respond and react. The United States has sanctioned certain individuals from the Xinjiang level, but provincial level, but no senior government officials or officials from Beijing. This provides evidence that that should change. Similarly, European and other democratic governments that have not issued sanctions should do so. And with this evidence of which individuals should be sanctioned, I think it is clear.
Yes. Another question I see here, what has the official Chinese state response been to these hacks? And what do you think they will do unofficially in response? The official response has been, this is another attempt to smear China by anti-China forces. And Xinjiang is a peaceful place where people live happily in harmony and there's good economic development. That's been their response, which is, it's really becoming their standard response to anything since spring 21. Before that, they would name me by name. They would attack me by name. They would attack certain media outlets or think tanks by name. They would be more specific. I think they have learned that their responses had really knock-on effects. They've become, their strategy in spring 2021 changed to give these very bland, generic responses naming nobody in order to generate as little secondary knock-on effect as possible. So their responses are now identical. They're completely bland. They never respond to any specific allegation at all, which of course, that's a smart strategy to do. But of course, it also doesn't help to allay anything, right? So meaning they have no counter arguments.
And I would just add that has been a smart strategy for them to deploy. The real question becomes now, to what degree do international media and governments kind of force that change? You know, if days, a week from now, next month at the meeting of the UN Human Rights Council, this issue is not front and center, China will realize their kind of demure, bland response worked, put the issue away and didn't get into it. If governments insist that China provide meaningful responses and answers to this evidence, that will force in some way China to change how it's responding, because then it will clearly not be sufficient. So that is a very open question that I believe is up to international media and particularly other governments to help determine by their own actions and how they respond directly, both bilaterally and multilaterally with China. I think, again, we've come to the end of questions. We'll wait.
There's just one half question here. The second part of the question is, what do you think they will do unofficially in response? So they will continue to hold press conference on Xinjiang. There has been, what else has there been? There has been a smear piece about me with some lies that was actually put out before this hit. So I think they used this before probably from press comments, but it's best to not highlight that. I think unofficially, they're probably gonna really again further tighten up IT security in Xinjiang. Any information security, they're gonna make it very tense. No leaks, no nothing, no hacks, no flow of information. As you can tell, Xinjiang drifts off the radar when there's no new information. That's how it works with the media. You always gotta have something new to have a front page, which is unfortunately, yeah, that's very sad because this issue needs the attention. Michelle Bachelet. So I think the Chinese strategy of just trying to eliminate new information, new witnesses, person be able to leave, has been quite effective. And so thankfully, we've had this new data. But again, so that's their main strategy, I think, unofficially. And they will just continue put out their counter propaganda and present happy Uyghurs, you know, happy dancing Uyghurs testifying about how good everything is. And it's going to be easier for them because they're now changing to a economic development mode with a new governor who's a technocrat. So the strategy in Xinjiang clearly has changed. They're going into long-term mode under Ma Xingrui, technocrat from southern China, from Guangzhou. And so that is a real problem because it's going to be even easier for them to pretend that everything is normal.
So we've not received any new questions in the chat.
There's a Q&A. I just see a Q&A. There's 2 questions and a Q&A. I'll respond to those, okay? They were not pasted in the chat. Firstly, by Wyatt Lim, do you think this is going to make any tangible difference in increasing triggering international action against China from as opposed to previously? So we are seeing some government responses, as we have said. Germany, much better than before. The most promising I see in Germany is that, the Germany's economic minister, Robert Habeck, said that this means that Germany's China policy has failed and needs a change, a rethinking. If Europe's biggest economy and politically, largest country of the European Union is openly talking about failure and need for change in its China policy in the context of Ukraine, Russia, already triggering a major rethinking, this seems to be quite pivotal. I think we are on the cusp of something here. Of course, he has to move against the German Chancellor Scholz, who will not like change, and he's not going to go for change. But I think the pressure on Scholz is really building. Also, not just with Ukraine, but also with China. And I think we see similar pressure. The UK government has often been pressured. Now they've said something. That's progress. Other governments, so the pressure is building up. But what we need is people and politicians who are actually willing, not just act under pressure, who are willing to make a change, who think this, who believe in the need to do something. So I hope this really energizes civil society. One of the main avenues for change is forced labor, legislation against forced labor, because that is directly illegal and it directly affects us. It's not just a human rights question, it's a legal question. And so I really hope that through forced labor legislation in other countries, the US enacted it already and needs to enforce it. More knock-on effects, more discussion, more change is going to happen. Now, the outside the Western world, Muslim world or non-Western world, it's very unfortunate. I really hope that they're going to see from the evidence that this is not just an American sort of conspiracy theory or allegation the CIA concocted up. But I really hope that they're going to take this seriously and hope that there will be change there. A second question by Philip Lechensky. Firstly, am I allowed to use images from the Xinjiang Police Files? The answer is yes, absolutely. Please credit myself and my institution. But you can absolutely use the images from the XinjiangPoliceFiles.org website. We have images of the police drills, images of the 2,884 detained persons, and PowerPoints and Excel spreadsheets with images of local police drills and the documents. And 12 documents are translated in English. So please use this, just give proper credit. Secondly, I'll be writing about Jokich's speech this morning, wondering if you might have analysis on this to share. Well, I would point also on XinjiangPoliceFiles.org website is research report, read the research. The first one is my long article. The second is the shorter article specifically on Jokich's speech, published with China Files. I'm happy to provide a link, but you can find it. It's also on my Twitter feed, in the main Twitter feed that has 50,000 likes. I link to both articles, but you find it on the website under research reports, okay? And there's a lot of analysis in that, but I'm also happy to speak with you further if you would like to. Third, I'm also interested to know how many files were obtained but not released, if such files exist, pertain to any of the following subjects. First, the medical establishment's role in the camps, relating policy regarding end-of-life care, death, and the disposal of bodies. So there's not, the short answer is no. There's not really evidence of that. Yes, there are many files that have not been released yet. Many of them contain personal information and not suitable for release into the public domain. And there's not any smoking gun stuff on medical organ harvesting or mass killing. Second, the use of pharmaceutical drugs in the camps on the prison population. Again, no, I've not seen that. Third, secured, but again, these are police files, okay? So, and I think there are some things also that even the police files would not have on file, you know? So So we cannot assume that something is not happening just because it's not in the files, is my opinion. Third, security guards being disciplined for misconduct. Yes, there's an example of that in my long research report. So on the research reports, the first report with the journal the Journal of European Association for China Studies on the website, but also on my long Twitter thread, you find it prominently cited. There's an example in the bottom part of the research report of a Chinese watchtower guard, a watchtower police officer who wanted to order. He missed the dinner time. He missed his dinner time, and he also said he was very tired of the food served in the camp to the guards, the police. So he ordered takeout, chicken takeout, and then he disabled the security system, the cameras, so the chicken takeout could come in without being recorded on camera. And this triggered a major alert at the prefecture police headquarters. And he was put into solitary confinement for several days as a punishment. Quite an interesting story. And we link to the original. So my long research report has every document that's quoted in a long research paper. You can download the original Chinese document. There's a link at the bottom in references, okay? Including that document, the original Chinese document that outlines this particular incident. Spies and informants in the Uyghur community. So my long research report talks a little bit about how they have seen
Hello? It's unclear if he cut out. All right, well, I think he froze and had to disconnect. Well, I think we're going to end here. I want to thank everyone for joining. Thank you for your very insightful questions. Of course, please continue to reach out to us if you have further questions, or we'd be happy to provide more information. As Dr. Zenz already said, almost all of this can be found at the website xinjiangpolicefiles.org, or also on our Twitter threads, where we posted many of these articles and journal reports as well. But please don't hesitate to reach out if there are further questions. And thank you for covering this. This is extremely important. And in keeping with the theme we discussed, the real hope is that governments around the world take action. And of course, in representative democracies, the voice of the people and through independent media is essential in ensuring that that our governments have to respond to these new evidence. So thank you for raising these issues, writing about this, and we encourage you to please ask governments to comment and ask what actions will governments take in response to this new evidence to actually try to protect human rights. So Dr. Zenz, I see you rejoined us. You cut out there for a second. I just gave some kind of closing comments, but if you wanted to finish what you were saying, otherwise we can close out.
Well, actually, I was just about done with my comments on that. So I think I basically responded to it. I was almost going to finish anyway, so thank you. If there's not any further comments, I can't see it at the moment, then I think
there are
that's
none.
good. Okay.
Great. Again, thank you everyone for joining.
Yes, thank you all.